Monday Morning Marketing Podcast is brought to you by Esther of IPA Group, bringing premier online promotion to your business.
And Melanie of Stomp Social Media Training, who empowers business owners to manage social media and marketing for themselves.
And we're back with another episode of the Monday Morning Marketing Podcast. Today we're joined by Anne Gould, video and content specialist of Master the Digital Maze. Welcome, Anne.
Oh, thank you very much for having me on your podcast.
You're very welcome to be here. So you are a video and content specialist. How can you specialize in content? What is that? What makes content so special?
Well, I think that all my life I've been creating content. I started off when I was 20 being a journalist, and basically I spent over 30 years as a working journalist writing features, writing sport, lifestyle and travel and news and court and council, all those things. And I became an editor on an evening newspaper when print was a thing, and I've also edited magazines as well, and latterly a sort of very high class glossy magazine for Suffolk.
So over the period of time, you've actually learnt what the sort of language engages your audience, which triggers them to actually look at your content and move through any sort of journey that you want to take them through.
Oh, well, absolutely. And I think it's quite funny. I've been thinking about this recently because, obviously storytelling is a really big part of marketing. And there are lots of people who talk about stories. And when I go and sort of look at the way they tell stories, all their stories are sort of very little stories, really. And I think as a journalist, it requires a little bit of a change of the way that you think, because my story is something that's really unusual and stands out because it's unusual. And so the storytelling in marketing terms isn't always the same thing.
The one thing I hear a lot when people hear, and I'm sure you have the same thing as well, is when they hear I've got a background in journalism as well, is they think, oh, everything that's being said to me is no longer sacrosanct, or maybe they'll think I'll sensationalize something. Has this perspective changed in the time that you were doing journalism, or has it always been that way?
I don't know. I worked in sort of regional newspapers, and there was a very big sense of responsibility to your local community. And so, if you made something wrong, you might have somebody knocking on your door, sometime that, sort of few weeks later, complaining, or you'd be sitting on a bus and somebody would say, I know who you are the person who did so and so and so and so to my best friend, so there was always a very big sense of being sort of very accurate and sort of presenting both sides of the picture. I think things have changed recently. I think with social media, when the internet exploded and everybody sort of was allowed free rein, opinion became more important almost, or it was more exposed.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you said something there about your story is very different and very interesting and very out there. What about the people who feel that their story isn't very interesting? How can they go about storytelling?
Well, I think this is really interesting because I remember being a junior reporter and absolutely terrified of the chief sub, who was sort of it was a bit like a god, and he used to sort of come in and scream at us when we were juniors, and we were absolutely terrified. And I remember him saying there's a splash story in every single street in this town. And my experience, because I specialised in feature writing, was that you go and interview somebody nominally about one subject, and you often came away with 2 or 3 other stories as well, that sometimes are even better than the original story that you went there. So I think that people don't realise that the stories that are buried within them. And that's what I've always found very joyous, sort of actually finding those stories and sort of saying, hey, did you know that this is really unusual about you?
So storytelling, as you say, on social media is actually slightly different to the way that you would do maybe like an advertorial or a press release. So is this something that people need to develop a skill in, or would it be better to find an outside party that can do this for you? Or can we use the likes of ChatGPT these days?
I think ChatGPT is not a storyteller. It doesn't use those storytelling things. And I think that with a business, I think that ChatGPT will do a lot of stuff for you. It won't give you all that unique stuff, the stories, the testimonials, the case studies. It won't give you that, but it will take, quite a lot of the heavy lifting as far as, sort of writing those boring email sequences and things. But so, and none of us likes doing that. I mean, writing sales pages, I'm a writer, and it just drives me crazy. It's not interesting to me. So, and I can see Melanie's faces reflect that as well. So, I think that if people want to find those unique stories about them, they probably need to find an outsider, because we can't, we're too close to those stories. We can't see the wood from the trees, and you need to talk to someone else about what it is that's different about you.
It's a good thing, actually.
Yeah, very, very interesting, because there is a lot of chat these days about ChatGPT and other AIs that are available. Again, we're like every other podcast, we're not being paid to talk about these things. We are bringing you the information. But AI can do an awful lot of things, but like you say, it doesn't take over the personal aspect of it. It doesn't get into your head and put in the feeling. So like if somebody was to want to write a blog about their travel, or say, because you were saying that you were a travel journalist before we started recording, if somebody was to try to become a travel journalist without actually traveling to the country and try to use AI like that, how would people pick up on it?
I don't know. I don't think that that you can use ChatGPT in that way. I think that you can ask it questions. I've been using it quite a lot in the last 3 or 4 weeks. You can ask it questions and it will come back with suggestions for you. But you have to bear in mind that those are suggestions. They are it's a starting point. And I think for people who aren't trained storytellers, that helps them give a sort of a starting point for the content. Now, I've been teaching people video for many years, and one of the things that's always struck me is that you get one batch of people who sort of like, they latch onto the tech really fast, and they're doing all these whizzy things, editing, and then they say, well, what are we going to make videos about? And then there are other people who get the storytelling and struggle with the tech. And so I think that you naturally either sort of know what the content is, or you don't. And I think for the people who don't, that ChatGPT, you can go in there and say, give me 5 tips for a traveling in Europe, and it will maybe come up with a list of things. I haven't actually put any travel things in, but you could put five tips or 10 must-see cities in Europe. If I'm on a sort of on a budget and I've only got the weekend to visit, and it'll come up with a list for you. The other thing you actually have to remember about ChatGPT, though, is it's not always true. And there's a thing in AI which is called hallucinate or hallucination, where people where it's actually where the AI is telling you a fib, a lie, because it doesn't have access to that information. So today, Google Google launched up an AI product called Bard yesterday, and they had a video and they had a particular quote from someone which was wrong, and it's actually affected their share price. And I think their share price has dropped by 9% because they didn't go to the trouble of checking this content. Now, Melanie will know as a journalist that, it's absolutely essential to check your sources and to double check them. Google didn't do this, and it's made a significant sort of dent in their worth, which is quite interesng.
9% is not to be sniffed at either for Google.
No.
Well,
for
no,
anybody.
that probably billions. I don't know.
So I'm like yourself, Anne, or I'm probably speaking correctly here. I'm a bit of a purist. I will write all my own blogs. What I've actually been using it for is ideas for a scavenger hunt, things to do for Valentine's Day, meals to prepare. I've even got planting tips for amateur gardener and what to plant throughout the year. That's the sort of thing I've been putting in there.
So nothing to do with your own business.
Basically, no, nothing. And I mean, I have to stand behind what I write at the end of the day. And when you don't write it, you don't truly believe in it. So I guess, I am my best source. I don't need to double check and see who else it is. And so I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to blog writing. Absolutely. But there are some people out there that genuinely don't know how to get started with a blog, or how long it should be, or what kind of takeaways people want from it. So I think as a sampler, it's a great way to get started, and then maybe you can customize it and personalize it afterwards. I think some people really suffer with being unable to know how to put themselves across properly, or they don't feel confident with their spelling, or their grammar. And I think as a framework, ChatGPT is a great start, but I certainly wouldn't use it solely.
No, absolutely not. But I used it for a different purpose. So I have one of my somebody who's in my membership. She lives in Greece, but she speaks a number of languages, and I was aware that sometimes on TikTok, which I also teach, that you get questions in a different language that you don't know what it is. Now, of course, you can put it into Google Translate, but I asked her to give me a question in Farsi about TikTok. So she gave me this lovely thing that appeared. It looked like some sort of exotic inscription. But anyway, I put that into ChatGPT. It translated it completely accurately. But what was really more interesting was that I then gave quite a long reply. I think it was probably about 400-word reply. Press the button, it translated it back into Farsi for me, and we had a conversation, and it completely worked. And you think, wow, that takes it sort of one step further, doesn't it?
Yeah,
definitely. And like here at IPA Group, we have bilingual English, Spanish people who work with us, and we work with customers around the world. So that would take a lot of my stress of translating, because I'm one of those ones that I don't trust Google Translator, because there's so many different feelings behind the words. And I think that's one of the things here with AI. In whatever language you're talking, the feeling behind the word, or, especially in English, and I'm here in Northern Ireland, Melanie's in the Republic of Ireland, you're in England, there are so many different words for the same thing that if you say it in mainland, it might mean something completely different, even over here in the island. And in America, it means something completely different. And in Australia, it means, so you really have to know the nuances of the words. And that's something that AI can't do. But you could really put it through, like Melanie says, an amateur blogger, or somebody who doesn't know where to start, or somebody who maybe doesn't like it. They're not a journalist like you guys, and they just need a jumping off point, put it into it, and then go in and edit it. Don't just put it in and then send it out into the stratosphere.
I remember when
I'm sorry. I've actually put some I put some test emails in. So some test emails for an event that I'm running, and I said, rewrite them for me. Rewrite them, in a more salesy way. And it sort of generates it, and it's the same, but it's sort of like, cool, that is not me. But it uses a lot of the phrase that you see with, all the sort of big digital entrepreneurs that use these phrases. And it was just an interesting way to look at it. But what's quite interesting about it is that they say that it will adopt your style. If you put enough of your content into it, it will adopt your style. Now, I haven't seen it actually been able to do that with me. I have been putting stuff in there, but I haven't seen that it's done that. So we'll see. But I think that also that with AI, we're just at the beginning, aren't we?
Yeah.
And it's as bad as it's ever going to be at the moment.
What sense? In the sense of how?
Well, it's sort of clunky. It hallucinates. And it sometimes doesn't, and it can make things up as well. So I think that 10 years down the line, it's going to be a very different beast, and it's not going to go away.
Yeah, I was going to say it's here to stay. We have to get used to it, and it's not something that we should be scared of. I mean, like I'm young enough to remember, or old enough to remember, when the internet started, and people were like, "Oh no, what's this thing?" And it's coming into our houses, and it's coming into our phone line, and we can't make phone calls because people are on the internet. And it's changed and modified, and we wouldn't be without it these days. So I'm sure it'll get to that point as well.
Yeah, I have this fantasy that what will happen is that sort of really good writing, journalism is going to have a little sort of like quality stamp on it, things like Parma ham have in champagne and I'm trying to think of any other.
I love those examples.
Parmesan cheese. It can be made next door, but because it's not in the right area, it's not Parmesan cheese. It's something else. So I have this fantasy that sort of like proper creative content will have a sort of a stamp of quality on it.
Brilliant. We'll come back to this in a few years' time and make sure that you get the kudos for coming up with that idea, Melanie.
So when it comes down to creating content for business owners today, there's so many options, and I think sadly, especially as I'm helping people do start your own business courses, I've been doing it for several years now, and the expectation on them weighs so heavily that they come armed with all this knowledge, much more so than when we both started. 8, 10, 15 years ago. Because at the time we're all learning to go live, we're all learning to use video tools. Do you think that we have basically reached the end of the road as to what we should be expected to know, or are we all going to have to start metaversing or things like it in the years to come?
Well, I think that certain things work for certain businesses, don't they? And I think that the trick is to be able to find the thing that works for you. So if you're really good at podcasting, you podcast. If you're really good at video, you do video. And if you're really good at writing, you do writing. But there's so much writing out there. There's so much bad writing out there. I think that it's getting the good writing to sort of rise to the top and for it to be visible. And I think that often a lot of the visible content is not so good because it's been sort of, they've either paid for it to rise to the top of Google or, it's just littered with keywords. So it's hard to say, but I think that people just have to do what works for them.
So you don't think the expectation has changed?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the thing is that you look at some of the big content creators, or the big creators like Gary V, people like him. They've got teams of people. He gets on there and he does his sort of chat, or he gets on stage and gives his chat, and he's got a team of people who are sort of putting that into a podcast, or they're putting it into Instagram posts, and they're doing this with it, and they may stick it up on TikTok there, and and we don't all have to do that. I think that when people start out, they need to be on one place and just sort of populate that one place just to start with, until they get used to it, to what they're doing, so that they could then learn to repurpose it. But obviously, AI is going to allow sort of repurposing a lot more quickly. I've been looking at a tool that I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but a tool that you can put in I put in a masterclass I did about TikTok, which was, I think, about 37 minutes long, and I said, make X number of and of course this was a landscape type video as well, and I said, make five TikToks for me, press the button, and 3 minutes later out popped 3 short TikTok videos. Wow. And I think that is very helpful for people.
Does everybody have to have an unlimited budget to afford all of this?
Well, yes. I mean, but I think you just have to choose, don't you? I think you just have to choose what you're going to do. I mean,
and go where your audience is. Yeah,
that's right. So I don't really podcast, just don't do it. I make video, and I know that podcasting is very, very popular, and people say, oh, you should do it. I don't, because I've got a thing about sort of visuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's horses for courses, and there's something for everyone. But I think at the end of the day, as long as you are where your audience is, you don't need to worry about being everywhere. You don't need to have the big, massive teams. You don't need to have 40 hours in a day to be able to do it all. And I think that's where AI is really going to start helping us, like you said, to repurpose and to do it for us, rather than us thinking that we have to do it all ourselves. When you have to do your tax return, you don't sit and do it all yourself. You have your accountant there to help you. You have your online platforms, and you have all these different aids. And it's not just looking at siphoning through all the receipts that you have over the year. So things move on and things advance. And I don't think we should be scared or worried about them, because one of the main things when ChatGPT and AI, Jasper, etc., came out, the first thing people said was, oh, it's going to take our jobs. It's going to take the copywriters' jobs. It's going to take the journalists' jobs. And I don't think it's like that. It's going to work hand in hand. So, I think that's, in the end, it's a good thing. And it's something that we should look into and embrace. I personally, at the time of recording, haven't been able to get onto it because there's a waiting list now, because it's so popular and their system just can't deal with so many people. But I'll get onto it eventually. And there's not just AI for text, there's also AI for images, which has a long way to go. But I mean, things are getting there. We've got, Canva, if you don't want to use a graphic designer either. And there's still graphic designers all around the world with lots of work, even though Canva exists now. So there's something for everyone. And I just want to say thank you very much, Anne, for coming on today and being on the podcast. How can people get in touch with you?
Right, so, well, obviously I'm on TikTok. I'm annegould.video. I've got a website, which is masterthedigitalmaze.com. I've also got a masterthedigitalmaze.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram. So, that's Brilliant. Where you can find.
Brilliant. That's a great name, isn't it? Master the Digital Maze. That's just a fantastic name.
Yeah. Yeah, and we put all those links down.
It's one of those things that came to me one day, so...
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. And we'll be back next week with more digital? No, Monday Morning Marketing. What's the name of the podcast again? We'll be back next week with more Monday Morning Marketing. Until then, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone. Why do I always blink in wave?
You're weird.
I know. God, that was intense. There was so much questions. This is what happens when you get two journalists in a room.
I felt like the odd man out. It was like, you guys just chat. You go ahead.
I don't know. You still took over, in fairness.